It is being called a game changer and the start of a new era. Germany has promised to begin returning the artifacts known as the Benin Bronzes to Nigeria next year, making it the first country to do so. Germany has a collection of just over 1,000 Benin Bronzes. They're on display in museums in Cologne, in Dresden, Hamburg, Leipzig and Stuttgart. Now, the sculptures and metal plaques are from the ancient Kingdom of Benin, which is today known as Edo State in southern Nigeria. The bronzes were looted by British soldiers in 1897 and sold to museums in North America and Europe. The largest collection of the bronzes is held by the British Museum. Nigeria has been trying to get back the bronzes for decades without success. But momentum has been building over the last few years, with calls growing ever louder for artifacts seized during the colonial era to be returned to their places of origin. Germany's culture minister explained why Berlin had decided to act now. She said, quote, "We are confronting our historic and moral responsibility. We want to contribute to a common understanding and reconciliation with the descendants of the people who were robbed of their cultural treasures during the time of colonialism," close quote.
The Benin Bronzes, some of Africa's most prized treasures. For decades, demands for their restitution have grown louder. Now, cultural and political leaders have agreed to begin returning the artifacts held in German museums by next year.
I must admit, I cannot believe it, but there was a very positive result and everybody was agreed to it that the Benin Bronzes, the Benin looted art has to go back to Nigeria. So this is really great news.
And a significant change of heart. The bronzes were due to be showcased at Berlin's new Humboldt Forum. Just a few weeks ago, the foundation, which currently holds the bronzes, was reticent about the possibility of returning them. They can be seen in many museums around the world. The Benin Bronzes are exceptional art, and when they came to Europe, they highlighted a completely new image of Africa as a continent steeped in history and culture. The Benin Bronzes are, of course, part of the cultural history of Nigeria and Benin, but they have also become global. The 4,000 artefacts were plundered from the Benin Empire, now part of Nigeria, after a violent British raid in 1897. They were later sold to museums in Europe and North America. Now, Nigeria will regain sovereignty over some of these royal and sacred artworks so central to the nation's cultural heritage.
Nigerian partners can decide by themselves how this restitution will take place, how this repatriation will take place, and in case there will looted artwork will remain in German museums, that will be their decision, that it doesn't become again a wide dialogue.
Nigeria plans to build a museum in Benin City to house the looted artifacts.
We need, these cultural properties as inspiration, and that would come with, the return would seem for young people to see, because they can't come to Europe, they can't visit European museums. The only way they would be able to physically see these mimetic creations is if they were in Nigeria.
One leading European historian says her research shows that for decades, museums deliberately dragged their feet on the issue of restitution. Museum directors tried to buy time. They actually formulated it in writing as a strategy. They left the problem to the next generation. That's us. Now it's clear we mustn't continue to push it off to the next generation. We have to act. It's not just about ownership, but about a whole new way of thinking.
I really think we have to deal with this colonial wound and how we could perhaps become a place of repair. This is a very, very long way and very complicated, but we could try. So it could be, a museum could also be a kind of healing place, even in Europe.
Germany's decision to act marks a paradigm shift in the handling of looted artefacts.
And I'm pleased to welcome the Senegalese philosopher, Professor Souleymane Bachir Diagne, onto the program to talk about this. He is currently the director of the Institute of African Studies at Columbia University in New York. Welcome, Professor Diagne. Lovely to have you on the program. So this development is being called a game changer. Give us your reaction to the news that Germany will start returning Benin Bronzes to Nigeria next year.
Well, it is great news indeed, because you said it right. This is a game changer. Already the decision by the French president to restitute certain objects was a groundbreaking decision, but this is a huge game changer, because the Benin Bronzes have this hugely symbolic value.
Yeah, Professor, in your work, you've talked about that, how the Benin Bronzes are particularly important. Tell us what makes them so special.
Well, when they were looted in 1897, in a way, Europe discovered them more broadly. And the Benin Bronzes really changed the perception that Europeans had of African art. They were just fascinated by the sophistication of the work. They were really astonished at first by what it meant in terms of mastery of metal work, and in particular, the very sophisticated technique known as lost wax casting, meaning that you build a figure in wax and then you pour the melted metal into it, and when it's cold, it takes the form of whatever it is that you carved out of wax. And so that's a very important aspect in the first place. That is on the European side. It meant for the perception of African art. And then there is the fact that the way in which they were acquired is really a euphemism. They were looted. They were actually taken by violence from the palace of the king of Benin, of the Kingdom of Benin in the late 19th century.
That's right, Professor. So what do you make of the arguments against restitution, right? The most prominent being the view that the art is safer and better cared for in European and North African museums, North American museums, than it would be in Africa?
Well, let's take these bronzes precisely. Let's take these bronzes. They were taken from a place where they were safe. They were taken from the palace of the king. So the first and most prominent thing to be considered is the fact that we are talking about righting a wrong. If that principle is established, then everything else becomes technical. It is normal that as they developed, and they developed their own infrastructure for culture, for museum, etc., these countries are now asking for the restitution of the objects, meaning that they have themselves developed capacity to keep them, and they have developed museums.
Prof, hold that thought for a second. Professor, just hold that thought for a second, because I do want to come back to something that you've just said. You talked about righting a wrong. So there is, of course, the moral and ethical argument, right? As you're saying, what was stolen should be returned to its rightful owner. But beyond that, what kind of connection do Africans have to these objects?
Well, let's take the bronzes. All the plaques, the bronze plaques that you had in the palace of the king of Benin at that time. What do they do? What was their function? They were telling the narrative of the Kingdom of Benin. These are testimonies of what is known as art court. And this is probably why they are naturalistic art. Usually African art is known to be very symbolic, very abstract, and not really reproducing reality as it is, but a kind of symbolization of reality. In this particular case, you have mainly naturalistic art because they tell the narrative of the kingdom itself. We know that many of the heads are heads of kings of Benin. So the narrative being told, if you take that with you, if you loot it, if you plunder it, it means you are taking the memory of a particular kingdom. So this is why it is not just the moral aspect, it is really a way of reconnecting a memory that has been fragmented. It is a remembering of the African memory.
And that is Professor Solomon Bashir Diagne. Thank you, Professor. It's been great having your views on this topic.
Thank you for having me.
We sent our team out to get some reaction from people in Nigeria, where the news has been welcomed. But as you're about to hear, there are some doubts too.
Do we trust ourselves? Some people will surely go there and loot it and sell it back to another country that needs it. I think the problem is every one of us, not only the government. Do we trust ourselves? If the Germans are returning it, I think it's our assets. We should keep it. I believe they should even return it back to the Benin, Edo State. And they should now handle it. I think there should be a museum there owned by the federal government. And the people, it's their assets. So they will take care of it very well. But if you leave it somewhere in Lagos or Abuja, anybody can go in there and loot it. And that's the end. We're back to square one.
I mean, Nigeria, being who we are, we may not be able, because we don't appreciate all those things, but at the same time, it's our own. Then it should be returned back to this country. And we should, every individual, every state should do, I mean, one of the things to keep those things. They are very important to us. They are more or less like our foundation, too. We should keep it.
I want Germany to return our artwork back to Nigeria. But the issue we have in Nigeria is security. How the governments will be able to protect these artworks when they are finally returned. But it's our assets in Nigeria. We should have it back. That's my own opinion.
Firstly, naturally, one would say if it is because it belongs to Nigeria, they should return it. But to some extent, I'm indifferent about it, because even when they bring it, who are they going to give it to? Because we can be sure the present government, they are going to return it back to them. They will sell it back to them. So to me, it doesn't concern me whether they return it or they don't return it. But if you look at the benefits of it, if it's something that they will keep in our museums that our children can have access to, you say, okay, it's beneficial. But I know that it won't go to the museum. They are going to sell it back to them. So to some extent, I'm indifferent about it. It doesn't concern me.
If they are really willing to do that, I think that is kind from them. Maybe something has pricked their conscience. You understand? So many things have been taken from us as a third world country, ignorant people. But it's left for the civilized to look back and say, is it worth it? These are cultural things. It has no meaning to them. These are cultural things. So it is nice if it has touched their spirit to return it. Okay. All I can say that I pray God that it will inspire those in power when these things are returned to work hard and take care of it. Because it's like a blessing. But to say whether I believe they can do it, I don't know.
It's not just the Benin Bronzes from Nigeria that are wanted by their rightful owners. There is also a claim from Cameroon, from where a special artifact known as the Tange was stolen from a local king. More than a century later, it is still in Germany. But as our reporter found, not everyone in Cameroon is of the view that it should be brought back to the country.
In Douala, Cameroon, Prince Koman Dumbe III has been advocating for the return of the Tange, a sculpture stolen from his grandfather in 1884. Prince Dumbe has made this copy of the Tange and put it on show in Cameroon. The original artifact looted by the Germans during the colonial times is on display at a museum in Munich.
We have come to meet the prince for an interview, but his spokesman told us he's not available at the moment. But we are told that the prince wants the Tange to be repatriated to Cameroon immediately.
However, not everyone agrees the Tanguay should be immediately returned. Princess Marilyn Douala Bell is an artist and founder of an art center in Douala. Even though her great-grandfather was executed in 1914 for resisting German rule, Marilyn thinks Cameroon is not ready to receive the artifact.
The repatriation should be a process. It cannot be immediate. It cannot be rushed. It has to be a process. We cannot receive an object tomorrow that was taken away more than 100 years ago. It was taken away under very complicated circumstances.
Others in Douala also claim to be the rightful owners of the Tanguay. At least one more descendant of a Douala king has made a claim on the artifact. For Marilyn, this is a source of concern. She wants the Tanguay to be returned, but fears the conditions are currently not right.
If an artifact is returned, who should it be given to? This was not an object that was taken away from a family. This is not an object that was taken away from an individual. It was looted from a community. So who is going to negotiate? Who is going to take charge of it?
For local artists like Stefan Elundu, who has been on the art scene for 20 years, the Tanguay represents more than just sculpture. He thinks it's a spiritual symbol that will boast local creativity if it is brought back.
Bringing back the Tanguay will be a means to inspire the young generation and to create a base for inspiration and creativity and to develop local culture.
Most people here want the Tanguay to be repatriated. However, there is no agreement on when, how, and to who the artifact should be handed back.